Our deep dives around the league continue with the New York Yankees. WFAN's Sweeny Murti joins us next on the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. Welcome to another episode of the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. I am your host, Ariel Cohen, and with me as always, Ruvain Guy. How are you, Ruvain?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and joining us, we have a special guest from WFAN. He is the Yankees beat reporter for them and does the pre- and post-game shows there. You can follow him on Twitter at YankeesWFAN. Sweeny Murti, welcome to the show.
Hi, guys. How you doing?
Doing great.
Doing great.
Doing great. And, before we get into some of the Yankee stuff, just maybe can you tell everyone a little bit about you and, how you got your start in the industry and, how you got to where you are today?
Well, yeah. Well, I'm getting pretty old, so this might take a while. I've been at WFAN since 1993. I started covering the Yankees in 2001, and have been doing that ever since. I started in radio when I was a teenager, because I grew up in Middletown, Pennsylvania, and we had a working FM radio station in our school district that you could join as early as seventh grade, which I did. When I was in eighth and ninth grade is when I started doing, we played music, we read news, sports, weather, all kinds of things like that, and had a lot of fun doing those kinds of things. When I was in eighth, ninth grade, I started, concentrating more on sports, and we broadcast our school's high school football and basketball games, and I started to really enjoy that. And it was about that time I just kind of started to focus on this and realizing that, I'd listened to baseball games on the radio my whole life to that point, and recognized that that's actually a job, that's a career. So I grew up, as I said, in Pennsylvania, and I was listening to Phillies games on the radio constantly. And so those guys broadcasting those games, Harry Callis, Andy Musser, Chris Wheeler, Richie Ashburn, they were the guys I grew up with, and learning and loving baseball and the radio. That was when it kind of put into focus for me that was something I could pursue, and I did. So I ended up, continuing that through high school, went to Penn State, and majored in communications. And after my junior year, I got an internship at WFAN. That was 30 years ago this summer, and it changed my life completely. It introduced me to New York and to FAN and the people there, and it gave me just the confidence that I could work in that environment. I come from a small town. It can be a little intimidating in New York City sometimes. So I got here. I enjoyed it here. I made it back after a short while after graduation, after working in a few different places, and then I've been here ever since. So season number 21 covering the Yankees, and a lot has gone on, lots changed, but thankfully I'm still able to do this, and people enjoy it. Thank you.
Yeah, and certainly myself and Ruvain, growing up in New York and still living in New York, we've certainly heard you over the years, and just a pleasure to listen to, and so glad to have you on the show here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Let's do a little Yankees here, and we're doing a bunch of deep dives into teams, and thought that no better person to have on to cover them than you. Let's just start with generally, who do you think the Yankees MVP has been to date? According to Fangraphs WAR, the current leaders are Garrett Cole with a 3 WAR already, 2/3 of the season. Pretty good. Judge at 2, Gleyber Torres 1.4, Jordan Montgomery 1.2. In your mind, who has been the MVP for the team?
Well, I go 3 ways at this point, and I don't mean that as a cop-out. I just mean simply there are 3 players who stand out for what they're doing, and one is Garrett Cole, one is Aaron Judge, and the other you didn't mention is Aroldis Chapman. And I understand, why he doesn't, rate as highly in WAR, but if you look at those 3 players, they're having outstanding years with a team that doesn't have a lot of outstanding years. I was actually surprised by Gleyber Torres. I would guess that's kind of relative to the shortstop position. So maybe that says a lot about where that falls. But I feel like listen, Cole and Judge are pretty much self-explanatory here for what they're having award caliber seasons. If you stack this up with Cy Young and MVP, those two guys are right there. As far as Chapman, there's, the bullpen is a strength, and the Yankees have had a couple of blips lately with some of their setup guys. Which is to be expected in the course of a long season. Chapman has just been outstanding. And it's part of the reason that I look at who the Yankees are and the idea of what they kind of need to do to kind of go for it here. You can't be wasting seasons that you're getting from guys like Cole and Judge and Chapman, especially when you consider where you are, in their lifespans and their contracts. You have to give every opportunity to win when you have those guys performing at the level that they're performing.
And speaking of Garrett Cole, we mentioned his WAR is 3.0. Right now, there are only two pitchers who have a higher WAR. That's Jacob DeGrom with a 3.2, and Corbin Burns actually has a 3.1 WAR. So Cole is one of the best pitchers, if not top five best pitchers in all of baseball. His ERA is 2.26. He's got a FIP of 1.9. His K per nine is 12.3, and his home run to fly ball rate, which has improved, is 9.4 compared to last year, which was one of his more career. He had almost a career high in that. How do you think he's going to go forward the rest of the season? Do you think this is going to continue? Do you think the other teams are going to catch up to him? Do you think the amount of innings he's going to pitch is going to affect him as well?
Well, I think those are all great questions. He has, listen, he's obviously really, really good, right? I think the fly ball part is interesting because that's affecting the Yankees too. And, the ball has something to do with that from what, just the anecdotal evidence people are talking about. Um, and that should help him as this goes on. How strong he stays throughout the year, I think, is going to be something fascinating to watch. He certainly will go through a period, I think, where um, he'll have to manage that a little bit and kind of figure out how to get through that. But he's at a really good part of his career where I don't think last year probably affected him the same way it would have others because of what he had built up to leading up to last year and some of the work he put in, throwing in between. It's not the same as getting starts and getting innings and real competition, but I think if you just, know a little bit about what you've seen from Garrett Cole the last 2 years and how he goes about things, I think he didn't lose as much last year as maybe others did. And as long as he's physically strong, you know, he might, you might worry if you start getting up close to that 200 inning mark, but until you're kind of bumping up against that, I don't think that there's a real concern yet. I think you're just looking at a guy who is, like the guys you mentioned, and especially DeGrom because he has a little bit more of a history doing it than Burns. You're talking about two guys who are just elite right now and are just continuing to be that.
And following up with that, if Cole would be the MVP for the Yankees this year, I think DJ LeMahieu was arguably the MVP last year. What's going on this year? I know his BABIP is 40 points below his career, so he is a little bit unlucky, but his hard hit rate is down. His home run to fly ball rate is the lowest since 2017, and his K rate is up, which is not like him. What's going on with LeMahieu this year?
Yeah, his ground balls as well. And that's, that was part of a lot of the double plays early with him. Don't know, it's, and like over the weekend, there were, again, a couple of balls that were hit that, kind of died in the outfield. And I spoke to somebody on my way into the ballpark on Sunday, and we were talking about LeMahieu and some of those balls that were hit, and they said, yeah, 2 years ago, those are home runs. It's definitely the ball is what was relayed to me. So I've kind of been focusing on that a little bit, just kind of paying attention a little bit the last few days of just trying to think about that as a factor. Um, but beyond that, you're right. The hard hit percentage, his exit velo's down. Uh, Although, if and you know that's what we can see measured. If you're just watching with your eyes, you still see a lot of hard hit balls that find fielders' gloves, and he's just not, as you said, he's running into some bad luck on that as well. But to me, this isn't all about the home runs. And the same with Glaber. With those two guys specifically, if you see their slugging is down tremendously. And to me, that's got to be doubles too, not just home runs. I mean, you're talking about balls into the gap that are going to help score runs. That's what both of these guys are missing right now, and it is. DJ LeMahieu was on the last homestand, which was very important homestand. 4 against Tampa Bay, 3 against Boston. He went 5 for 30. All 5 hits were singles. Um, this is just troublesome because what you saw the last few years, and he's. I think it's funny if you put together the Yankees have played 60 games, right? If you put together last year's 60-game season with this year's 60-game season, LeMahieu's actually had a pretty good year combined, but it's a pretty steep drop off. So I guess that's kind of me saying that if you had if he had been able to play 4 straight months, and you're looking up at the end of August, and he's hitting low 300s with a good on base and decent slugging, you say, oh, he's having a pretty good year. But we've seen 2 separate years from him with 2020 and 2021, and there's a stark contrast, a big difference. And I don't know what the answer is, and a lot of other people who I've spoken to don't either. But this is a major, major factor in the Yankees' offensive woes. Is the guy hitting at the top of the order is not producing nearly to the level that he was the last 2 years.
Yeah, and certainly his BABIP being 40 points below means he's been a little bit unlucky with the singles. But the two things I see, one is what you mentioned with the ball. And we talk a lot in the show because we do primarily fantasy baseball a lot here on the show. But the ball affects the just enough homer guys more. DJ LeMahieu is not a Giancarlo Stanton who's, if he gets a homer, he's knocking it way out of the park. The ball having an effect doesn't do much to Stanton. It does a little bit to LeMahieu. But what I see is actually contact issues. If you look at his O contact, which means what percentage of the time he's making contact out of the zone, and his Z contact, what percentage of the time he's making contact in the zone, those numbers are down, especially outside the zone. His O contact last year was 82%. This year it's only 67. So the number of times he's swinging to the times he's getting the bat on the ball outside the zone, he's not doing it this year. He's just not making proper contact out the zone. He probably needs a change in his eye in order to get corrected so that he's focusing more on the swings in the zone, which he's handling almost as good as he did before.
Yeah, it's basically just chasing pitches out of the zone, and sometimes if you have a high contact outside of the zone, I mean that's not necessarily a good thing either. It makes you kind of chase those more, and maybe that's part of what's happening here too. Um, Either way, he's not driving the ball the same way he was the last couple of years, and it's just simply, he's not under the same scrutiny as some of the other guys in the lineup. But the Yankees brought him back, long-term deal, big deal, very important player. He has. I've mentioned this on the shows a few times. When 15 years ago, when the Yankees were going through troubles where they would have slumps offensively as a team, Derek Jeter would always stand up and say, listen, I'm not doing my job getting on base enough for these guys behind me. And that's basically what LeMahieu is. Now, he's a different kind of hitter, but it's basically having the same effect when LeMahieu was doing what he was doing at the top of the order. Especially, you look at how much trouble the Yankees are having in the first inning, right? Well, duh, that's DJ LeMahieu getting on base in the first inning. That's a big part of what's happening right now.
Yeah, no doubt that he is really the key component, and it is disappointing. Let's talk about trades. The Yankees, I'm assuming, and maybe you can correct me otherwise, that they would be buyers, not sellers. We do see a little bit of an issue money-wise. They are almost not even $2 million away from the luxury tax threshold, according to Spot Track. Is that a problem, the money issue with the threshold? And B, if you are the Yankees, what are your needs and who you're trying to acquire on a deadline trade?
Well, need number one is center field. They played Aaron Judge there twice last week, and as I've said a few times, it's this is a guy that every once in a while you see them put him in bubble wrap and say, okay, we need to take care of you, and to have him play center field as he's the number 2 center fielder in the depth chart, and Tyler Wade is the number 3 center fielder in the depth chart, all behind 37-year-old Brett Gardner. that's the number one need for me. Um, and it's unfortunate Aaron Hicks suffered the season-ending injury as opposed to the other injuries that you were saying. Okay, maybe you can get him back from. That's need number one. Um, and startlingly, starting pitching is not as high a need right now. Although I can see trying to fortify that depending on what's available. But the idea that Severino is coming back, and you know, I'm not going. I need to wait more time to see what Corey Kluber is and how he bounces back from this, because it seemed pretty significant at the time. But starting pitching is kind of down the list of priorities for me right now. Um, Outfielder who provides some offense, and frankly, the guys in the lineup right now need to provide the offense too, as we just outlined. The luxury tax threshold is, well, is it an issue? It depends on who you're talking to. As far as is it a problem? The Yankees have been pretty steadfast in holding to this in the years where they have wanted to. You've seen other years where they've blown past it. Um, but in the years where they've been committed to staying under, they have made every move with the idea that they are staying under. And that's what's going to be really tricky here, because as we outlined earlier, they have some really good players having phenomenal years that you probably can't afford to waste without trying to win a championship with these kinds of seasons. So they've run into some problems just like every other team has, and you have to think about the ability to go outside the organization, and that's going to mean adding payroll. Um, Although, if you look at it from the Yankees standpoint, they've already obviously spent a lot of money on a lot of players, and as I said, they've kind of had this ideal when they set their mind to sticking under the tax threshold that generally seems to run their plan. I don't remember actually mid-season when they have been okay with going over that in a year where they're committed to staying under. Usually they set that number at the beginning of the year, and it doesn't really move very much from that. So that's going to be a big determining factor in what they can do here, and how aggressive they can be, for sure.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about Gleyber Torres. He has 9 errors at shortstop this year in 50 games. Last year, he had 9 errors in just 40 games started. I kind of see him as a second baseman. The question is long term, especially with the free agency market this year. You got Carlos Correa, Javier Baez about to hit. Do you see him as the shortstop of the future for the Yankees, or do you think that the Yankees go and get a big name shortstop in the offseason and move him over to second?
I think that was a hot topic for me early in the season when Torres he had committed errors in spring training and got out of the gate very slow, and really in the off season, because last year was a problem too. And if you were looking at how to improve some of the balance on this team, make yourself more athletic, you could have seen the idea of trading Luke Voigt, moving DJ LeMahieu to first, Torres to second, and I'll slide in one of the shortstops. It's definitely a possibility, and I think it was a more important question, like in season early, a question earlier in the year. Now that the Yankees have had these other issues that we're talking about, I think trying to figure out that for the 2021 season slides down the list of priorities. He's no longer my biggest concern for this season, although I am still concerned about his defense and whether or not that's how my team looks best. Um, so I don't think it's an in-season deal anymore. I thought at the beginning of the year, I thought that was a possibility, but to me, center field trumps that right now. The first base injury to Voigt was a problem, and we'll see what happens there. So that's a bit of a concern for me too. So I would slide that down my list of priorities for in season. Off season, it is definitely something to consider, but now I need to keep a close eye on how Oswald Peraza moves through the Yankees minor league system and what his potential is here to be at the big league level sooner rather than later. I believe he's moving up to Double A. and he had an outstanding month of May at High A Hudson Valley. The people I've talked to who watch this guy just rave about him and how special he is and how quickly he can move through the system. And just drawing comparisons to, he's 20 years old, drawing comparisons to 20-year-old Derek Jeter. Now, that doesn't mean that, he's going to get 3,400 hits and walk into the Hall of Fame. It just describes to you what you're seeing at a particular stage of a person's career. So I'm interested now, if the Yankees have other priorities in season, then it buys Glaber time at shortstop now, and it gives you time to see what Peraza does the rest of this minor league season, how quickly he moves up, and you know what you project for him, how quickly you think he could impact at the big league level. Because then it becomes, okay, can Oswald Peraza be the starting shortstop for the Yankees sometime in 2022 or 23? Or do you need to sign one of these great shortstops to a 10-year, $300+ million deal? And obviously, you know, that's that's a major consideration there when you're talking about the big difference in cost analysis for those two types of players. So I don't think you're there at an answer yet, but I think a lot of it is because you have other problems, and you can now buy yourself a little bit of time to deal with shortstop.
Now, switching gears just a little bit, I am an orthopedist, so I want to talk about a couple of injuries on the
Okay.
Yankees. Luis Severino, he had his first rehab outing in Tampa. He hit 98 on the radar gun. He threw 34 pitches. He looked pretty good, threw 11 sliders. And I have also a question about Giancarlo Stanton. He sat one game over the weekend. He did pinch hit, but the Yankees have 2 games off this weekend. They're going to an NL team. They're going to the Phillies over this coming weekend. Is there anything wrong with him?
I don't think they'd use him if there's anything wrong with him. I think they would, take the opportunity. Well, I put it this way. I don't know if there's anything wrong with him, but clearly he's not the same hitter since coming off the injured list, and maybe he needed more at bats. He was really hot. He wasn't going to stay that hot. But I think, as we've seen, the problem with Giancarlo Stanton is he's either really hot or really cold, and there's rarely something in between. So I guess it's easy to wonder if there's something wrong with him, but then you look at what you see with him and say, okay, this is kind of what you're seeing. Um, and you're right. They play 2 games next week in National League Park. Good thing for them. It's not an extended. I remember in 2009, the Yankees played 9 straight National League road games, and Hideki Matsui was nothing more than a pinch hitter. Very important piece and he actually had a good. It actually worked out well for them. That was at a point in time when they could actually give him a break, and he had trouble with his knees. It was 9 days in a row where he didn't have to worry about playing every day, and just get ready for some pinch hit at bats. And it was actually a good in-season break, and it worked out managing that player at that time. This, as I mentioned, as a player who's already had some time off and some other days built into this. So we'll see how he handles that. Severino. I'm interested to see, let's see, if he goes 50 pitches next time, 65 after that, is that going to be enough for the Yankees to bring him up, depending on how he looks? They've already kind of hinted at the fact that he doesn't need the full buildup. He doesn't need to be built up to 90, 100 pitches and then, come up and do that. They could use him for shorter stints in the big leagues if they basically demonstrates that he's healthy and commanding and doing all that. Um, I need to I would need to see a couple of more just to see how he reacts and responds and what he's feeling. It's not always a straight line up when you're coming back from Tommy John surgery. There's pitchers who've gone through it just describe sometimes they're just bad days, sometimes they're just bad stretches, and you have to kind of deal with that mentally. That it's not every step isn't going to be forward. Sometimes you take a couple of steps back and you just kind of deal with that, and hopefully the steps back aren't severe. You've seen it with Noah Syndergaard with the Mets. So you hopefully the next couple outings go well, and you can start to think about penciling him in, and we'll see what he's on an every 6-day schedule now. I don't think that means a 6-man rotation, but I do think it gives the Yankees some flexibility in how to use him especially if they don't want to stretch him out completely before bringing him back.
So I see a little bit of an issue with the Yankees in terms of innings and managing workload. You had the short 60-game season last year, players coming off of injury for them, and you have guys in the Yankees who have not pitched a lot. Jordan Montgomery, he has 60 innings so far this season, 48 over the last 2 years combined with Tommy John surgeries and all that. Taillon, 37 innings over the last 2 years. He has 53 this season. How much can he go? Domingo Germán, 60 innings so far this year. Didn't pitch at all last year. Debbie Garcia, only 34 innings last year, so on and so forth. And we know that some players on other teams are going to be capped. Maybe a lot of teams are doing 100 plus whatever the innings they pitched last year. The question to you is, how are the Yankees going to manage these workloads? Is there going to be a crunch at the end if all of these players either can't go the whole time? Does that maybe increase the trade possibility? Does that make Kluber all the more important to come back? Does that make Severino come back? I guess it's a lot to unpack there, but I am a little bit concerned about the innings towards the end of the season for them.
Yeah, and that's where, if Severino and Kluber both respond well, then that is part of the answer there. And I don't think anybody knows. Really, I think you have to take it on an individual basis with these guys. As we talked about Garrett Cole, we're really not all that worried about Garrett Cole, right? Because of the workloads he had the previous years, and just kind of where he is in his career. But these other guys are at various different points, and they didn't have the same, they don't have the same, say, 3-year history as Cole. And I don't think there's a blanket answer for all that. I think you kind of have to watch to see what they're doing. And you're going to see games where a guy comes out after 5 innings and 82 pitches, and you're going to wonder, could he have gone further in that game? And if the bullpen blows the lead, you're going to ask that question. But this is a long-term kind of plan too that you kind of have to stick to. So, yeah, I think we're now exactly at the 60 game point. So you're now getting into the part you didn't last season. So here's where you kind of start to watch and see how they measure it, because you're a third of the way through. You still have 2/3 of a season to go. And this is where you kind of have to start to figure out as it gets hotter out and the guys start to work harder. They're getting to a point where they didn't get last season. Now you're going to start to see how is their stuff? How is their stamina? What does it show you? And this is kind of where you start to figure out how you have to plan for the final third based on what you're seeing in this middle third. So a lot of information to digest over the course of these 2 months to figure out what you're going to see over the final 2 months.
Now the Yankees are in 4th place in the AL East. They're 6.5, currently 6.5 behind the Rays. I have to ask this: is Aaron Boone on the hot seat? Is Brian Cashman on the hot seat? Because he's the one who put this roster together. Who do you think is more at risk here?
I would venture to say that I don't know your exact ages, but you were either very young or not even born the last time the Yankees fired anybody mid-season. It's been a long time since anybody was fired mid-season with the New York Yankees. You have to go back to, let's say, I guess it would be 1990. The last time a manager was fired mid-season for the Yankees.
Was that
I
Stump
don't.
Merrill? Was that Stump Merrill?
That was Bucky Dent.
Bucky Dent.
Stump
Okay.
Merrill took over for Bucky. Stump Merrill took over for Bucky Dent in the middle of the 1990 season and managed through the end of the 91 season.
Okay.
So they don't fire pitching coaches mid-season. They don't fire hitting coaches mid-season. It's just not something they do. So, or have done for a very long time. So, but I would look at Aaron Boone and say, okay, well, this is the last year of his contract. So if you want to call that the hot seat and say, okay, maybe he might not come back if the season doesn't go well. Yeah, I mean, that's all fair. And I think that's a legitimate question based on how this season plays out. But this season would have to spiral completely out of control. And I know that there are a group of fans who think that that's what's happening right now. But they went 22-9, I think, over a recent stretch. They're still over 500. This is not spiraling totally out of control yet. So I don't think that's what's going to happen as far as a mid-season thing. Aaron Boone's contract is up at the end of this season. Brian Cashman has another year on this contract after this. Um, I think it would take a lot for them to get rid of Brian Cashman with a year left on his contract. It's just simply not the way they've done business for a long time. But if you're telling me, is he in jeopardy of not coming back after that? Same thing with Aaron Boone, I would tell you. Yeah, I think that's a fair question based on how this is going to play out. You kind of have to get to the end of it to see if it's going to be a factor. But I will tell you this: there are no outward signs of any discord between Hal Steinbrenner, Brian Cashman, Aaron Boone. Now, it's been easy to say that when they win 100 games before getting knocked out of the playoffs. We'll see how this plays out. But you go back. It's been I looked this up very recently. Very coincidentally, the Yankees in 2009, in their 60th game of the season, were just swept by the Boston Red Sox. And they were sitting a few games better than this, three games better than this at this point. Joe Girardi was a manager who had not won anything yet, had just missed the playoffs the year before, and I guarantee you there were questions about his future and was he on the hot seat, and could they beat the Red Sox? Could they we know how that season ended, so you gotta let this play out a little bit and see what happens. But clearly these are all fair questions based on what you're seeing at this moment.
Yeah, and certainly that season did work out well for the Yankees. According to Fangraphs, the Yankees have a 54% chance for making the playoffs this year, 18% chance for making the division, so they're definitely in the thick of things. They're projected for 88.5 wins. Just want to end on a little bit of a personal note. Who in this industry has been your biggest influence for you so far?
I don't. I can't tell you one in particular, but I will tell you. I told you that I grew up listening to Phillies games, and the people who broadcast those games when I was growing up. It was the same four guys year in and year out. I mean, it was Harry Callis and Richie Ashburn and Chris Wheeler and Andy Musser, and I got to know and meet all of those guys. It's as a professional later, some better than others, and it was a thrill for me to just listen and grow up understanding that these are the guys who I wanted to be. Um, they so that's probably number one because they're the ones who kind of inspired me to get into this and do this. But I've had other names, probably less familiar and famous to anybody who's listening, because they're the ones who directly impacted my, my career. I go back to when I was in high school and junior high school and high school, and the guy who kind of got me into this and kind of molded me at a young age was John Wilsbach, who still runs the radio station at WMSS in Middletown, Pennsylvania, and has been a traffic reporter in the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania area for 30 years now, or more. When I got to college, I worked at WRSC in State College. The sports director there was Jerry Fisher, who gave me gave me a lot of leeway to kind of get on the air, do some things, sometimes make some mistakes, and do whatever you need to do. And he put a lot of trust in me and let me kind of go along the way. Jerry's father, Fran Fisher, was a longtime play-by-play announcer for Penn State football. Then I got my internship at WFAN. Eric Spitz was the executive producer at the time and in charge of hiring interns. He went on to become assistant program director and program director at WFAN, and now is over at Sirius XM satellite radio. I saw him last week. He's still one of my closest friends in the world. Those three guys kind of helped move me up and along, as and not just personally, not just professionally, but personally, as I move through this. And Mark Chernoff, who's leaving WFAN at the end of this month, is the guy who hired me in 1993 when I came back to FAN after my internship. And he's the one who I still remember walking into his office on a summer day, kind of like this in 2000 where I laid out a couple of things that I wanted to do. And one of them was, hey, if I don't know what you're doing with the Yankees beat next year, but I'd be interested. And he said, "Oh, really?" And I saw him scribble it down on his notepad, and that was the beginning of getting my name into that mix. And here I am. So the fact that he trusted me with that and has let me keep doing this all these years under his watch. Um, these are guys who have shaped my life, because everything I have going in my life wouldn't have been possible without all these other steps along the way. So that is that is a short list of people who I will say really have helped bring me where I am today.
That's a great story, and it always takes a little bit of luck and a little bit of skill to get you to where everybody is in life. And I mean, you mentioned some of the luck there, but you certainly have skill. And really want to thank you so much for providing your insights on the Yankees and helping our listeners go a little bit deeper on the team. And thank you so much for coming, Sweeny.
Thanks for your kindness. Thanks for all the kind words, and I appreciate having me on.
All right. Well, we'll be back here later this week with another episode of the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. From all of us here at Beat the Shift, we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. Follow us on Twitter at beat_shift_pod.